I'm really delighted to be able to speak about the Whistleblower Award that has been given to Edward Snowden. If I were on the committee making the choice of who was to receive this award, it would take me probably 1.5 seconds at most to have come to the conclusion that he's the only person deserving of this award for this year, because he really does embody whistleblowing in its purest and most noble form. There's a lot of debate about what whistleblowing means, what exactly the attributes are that defines it. And I've written a lot about whistleblowing and have thought a lot about it. And I think that there's two real components to whistleblowing. One is the disclosure of wrongdoing, serious wrongdoing on the part of powerful factions. And the second one is to disclose that wrongdoing at some risk to yourself. So I think if you look at what the two criteria, the defining criteria are, he embodies both of those as purely as one can imagine. He exposed enormous amounts of wrongdoing on the part of the world's most powerful factions. He informed the world that there is a massive, ubiquitous spying system being constructed by the United States and its closest allies, aimed not at the terrorists or at criminals or people for whom there's evidence to suspect wrongdoing, but at all of us, people around the world. And I think the most significant revelation of what it is that he disclosed is that literally the objective of the United States and its closest allies in the UK, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia is the elimination of privacy globally, meaning the idea that there will be no ability on the part of any human beings to communicate with one another electronically without it being monitored, collected, analyzed, and stored by the United States government. One of the most profound revelations, I think, in the political landscape in some time. He also revealed enormous amounts of deceit on the part of the most senior national security officials, including deceit that is almost certainly criminal. High-level Obama officials going to the United States Congress and denying to the Congress that the NSA is doing exactly that which these revelations prove that they are doing. And so when you look at the combination of this invasive, massive spying system operating with almost no transparency or accountability, and the systematic lying on the part of senior Obama officials to the democratic institutions designed to check that, the amount of wrongdoing, the seriousness of it, that he revealed to the world is as significant as it gets. The second attribute, which is the notion that you revealed this wrongdoing at some degree of risk to yourself, self-evidently is something that Edward Snowden embodies as much as, if not more than anybody we've seen in a long time. I still remember so vividly the very first conversation I had with him in Hong Kong, when I asked him whether or not he had thought about the likely consequences of his actions. And with very stoic and rational demeanor, he ticked off one after the next all of the things that he knew were likely to happen to him that have now in fact happened to him, including being charged as a criminal under the Espionage Act, an incredibly draconian law that threatens people with prison for decades, that he would be publicly branded as a traitor and someone who has gravely damaged national security, and that in essence he would become the single most wanted man in the world by the world's most powerful government. And yet he undertook this course of action knowing that all of those things were likely to happen, because he told me in good conscience he could not sit by quietly and allow privacy and internet freedom to be destroyed while doing nothing about it. And he did it not only anticipating the risks, but knowing that they were almost certain to come and embracing them to such an extent that he was one of the calmest people I've ever interacted with, even as the anxiety and tension levels ought to have been through the roof given the extremity of a situation. But he was so convinced about the rightness of what he was doing that this equanimity had prevailed over him, and yet he was fully aware of the risks he was taking and yet took it anyway for the public good, which to me is also as pure a whistleblower as it gets. Ultimately, though, I think that what will end up being most significant and most enduring about the whistleblowing of Edward Snowden is not the specific information we end up learning about what the United States and its allies are doing in destroying privacy worldwide, nor will it be the truths about the U.S. media and the world media and their relationship to political power and the way they've allowed these systems to go undetected and unreported for so many years until he had the courage to step forward. I think what will be really most enduring is the lesson that he has taught all of us, the lesson about the power of a single individual to change the world, literally, through nothing more than a powerful choice. Edward Snowden, 3 months ago, was as ordinary of a person as it gets. He was born into no positions of wealth or power. His parents are middle class or lower employees of the federal government. He had no positions of prestige or special access of any kind. He grew up in a lower middle class background, was just a low-level employee of a national security state when he first entered it. And yet, through the choice that he made, he has literally radically transformed how we understand our relationship to political power, what the position of the United States government is vis-a-vis the entire world. He has triggered massive debates all over the planet about the importance of internet freedom and privacy and the dangers and menace posed by the U.S. surveillance state. Really a single individual who just on his own made a choice that had extreme ripple effects on all sorts of realms that I think to this day are still underappreciated and unknown. And this lesson that any individual, no matter how formidable the adversary seems, no matter how entrenched the oppressive institution appears to be, can stand up to that institution and challenge it and shine light on it and bring about real change, I think is a lesson that all kinds of people around the world, from very young to very old, on every continent in the earth, will take from this. And there will be untold numbers of people who will be inspired by the courage of Edward Snowden, by the sacrifice that he engaged in, by the principle stand that he took, by the passion and conviction that drove him to do what he did. And it very well may be the case that of all the impact that his conduct ends up having, what he actually ends up revealing will be a small part historically of what we end up learning when we look at all the people who end up inspired by him to come forward, and journalists who end up unafraid to challenge the world's most powerful factions, people being willing to risk all sorts of public smear campaigns and threats of imprisonment and stigmatization and demonization because they saw that Edward Snowden and the people who worked with him were willing to endure that, and to see the enormous amounts of good that they achieved and deciding that they too are willing to do it. So it isn't just the whistleblowing or the risk that he undertook personally that I think will be the most enduring impact of what it is that he did. I think it will be the template that he created, the inspiration that he provided for other people all over the world in all kinds of different realms to do the same. And I think the reason to award whistleblowing and to honor it and to give an award to whistleblowing isn't merely to give that individual the recognition that they are due, but also to send a signal to the world that whistleblowing is something that we honor and that we celebrate because of its incredibly potent and consequential impact on the rest of the world. And there's clearly nobody who has vividly illustrated the impact of whistleblowing as potently as he has, certainly this year and probably for many, many years. So I think this was an extremely brave, but also a very meritorious selection. And I'm very happy that the Federation and that this group had the courage to name him this. And I'm very glad that this award went to the person who clearly most deserves it for this year, Edward Snowden. Thanks very much for listening and for asking me to share with you some of my thoughts tonight.